Read it. Read it. Read it. Read it. Read it. Wrote it. Read it.
Have you ever wondered why a whistling tea kettle whistles? Well, it's simple. It's to let you know that the water's boiling, and you can hear it from any room in the house. I have a book entitled The Whistling Tea Kettle and Other Stories About Hannah by Mindy Skolsky. Now, Hannah was a little girl living in New York City about 1930, about the time your grandmother was a little girl. And Hannah loved her grandmother more than anyone in the world. And the one thing Hannah wanted to do was to please her grandmother with a nice present. But that wasn't easy, because whenever she gave her grandmother a present, her grandmother would look at it and say, "It's very nice, but it's not a necessity." And she would always give it back. Well, Hannah knew one thing that her grandmother needed more than anything in the world, and that was a whistling tea kettle. Because the old one she had in the back of her candy store didn't whistle, and it would sit there and let all the water boil away while grandmother was busy with a customer. And Hannah thought, well, if grandmother had one that whistled, she could excuse herself and run back and turn off the flame before all the water boiled out. So she looked and finally found the perfect whistling tea kettle. The next time she visited her grandmother, she gave it to her as a present. And as she expected, her grandmother said, "It's nice, but it's not a necessity," and tried to give it back. Hannah was very disappointed, but she was also very determined. She decided she would make her grandmother like that tea kettle, and she did.
A little while before 10 o'clock, a lady named Mrs. Beck came in for an ice cream soda. Now, most of the customers had the same thing every time, but Mrs. Beck always picked something different. The last time Hannah had visited, Mrs. Beck had ordered a banana split. While Hannah's grandmother was putting the ice cream in Mrs. Beck's glass, she asked Hannah if she'd like some ice cream in her cone. "After all," said her grandmother, "that's what an ice cream cone is for." "Oh, I like candy better," said Hannah, drawing Mrs. Beck with a straw in her mouth. "Besides, it's nearly 10 o'clock and I don't want to spoil my appetite." Hannah handed Mrs. Beck her picture and said, "I think I'll put on the tea now." She went into the back room. "Use the old kettle," called her grandmother. Hannah sang "My Country 'Tis of Thee" in a loud voice so she wouldn't hear. Then she filled the new kettle with water, lit the stove carefully the way her mother had taught her, put the kettle over the burner, and came back out front. She was still singing "My Country 'Tis of Thee," and Mrs. Beck said she was a nice, patriotic girl. "10 o'clock, said Hannah to her grandmother. "I'll help you clean up." "And helpful, too," said Mrs. Beck, finishing her soda. "And an artist?" asked Hannah's grandmother. "The best," said Mrs. Beck. She said her picture was even better than the last time, when Hannah drew her with a banana in her mouth. "She takes tap dancing lessons, too," said Hannah's grandmother. "I'm going to send a penny postcard to Hollywood. Tell them she's better than Shirley Temple." "Grandma," said Hannah. Mrs. Beck said goodnight, and the cleanup began. Hannah's grandmother washed all the glasses, and Hannah pressed each one down on the water sprayer to spray the soap suds off. They were drying the glasses together when two men walked into the store. Well, Hannah didn't recognize the men. One of them had a little suitcase. He went into the phone booth. "I'd like a malted," said the other man. "Closed," said Hannah's grandmother, pointing to the clock. "Ah, lady, please make me a malted. My friend's got to use the phone, and I'm dying for a malted. I'll give you a quarter." "A quarter? What are you, a spy from Kaplan's to see if I raise my prices? I charge 15 cents for malteds." She pointed to the price list on the wall. "My price is for everybody. I'm not crooked Kaplan. This is an honest place." Hannah's grandmother started to make a malted, and to prove just how honest she was, she made the 2 scoops of ice cream so big the malted foamed up to the top before the ice cream was even melted. Hannah was getting ready to say now when she noticed her grandmother staring into the mirror behind the malted machine. Her grandmother looked so funny, Hannah looked into the mirror too to see what she was looking at. When she saw, Hannah forgot all about now. The man in the phone booth was picking on the coin box with a screwdriver and emptying all the coins out. He was stuffing nickels, dimes, and quarters into his suitcase. "It's worse than spies. It's robbers," said Hannah's grandmother. The man behind the counter reached into his pocket, and the malted machine ran over. Hannah's grandmother put her hand on top of Hannah's head and pushed hard. Hannah landed underneath the counter, right in the container of sugar cones. They went crunch as she fell in. Her behind was wedged in tight, and her legs stuck straight up. "Grandma, let me up!" Hannah had never seen a robbery except in the movies. Well, then she got scared. Maybe the man would shoot her grandmother, like in the movies. So she pulled her grandmother down under the counter next to her. "What a place for a grandmother," said her grandmother. "I can't fit." The malted machine was still buzzing, and the malted was running over the counter and down onto the floor. It made slop, slop sounds as it landed right in front of Hannah and her grandmother. A loud, screechy noise filled the room. It was so loud it made the buzzing of the malted machine sound like a little fly instead of a bumblebee. "Police whistle!" yelled the man in front of the counter. The noise got louder. Hannah heard loud footsteps running. She heard the phone booth doors open, the sound of something dropping, lots of clattering sounds, and more footsteps running. And "Police! Police!" called Hannah's grandmother, getting up and running toward the front door after the two men.
Looks like that tea kettle saved their lives. Imagine a tea kettle scaring off robbers. But the thing was, that tea kettle had a whistle that sounded just like the whistles that the policemen used back in those days. I think you'll enjoy all the stories about Hannah and her grandmother in the whistling tea kettle. Now I have another collection of stories. Again, they're set in New York, but this time about 100 years ago. The Witch of 4th Street and Other Stories by Myron Lavoie. Now in the first story, you meet a girl named Kathy and a boy named Aaron. They like to do fun things like going over to see old Mr. Coletti, who had a trained monkey. They also like to do scary things, like going up 4th Street and looking at an old woman whom Aaron said was a witch.
Many years ago, a girl named Kathy Dunn came with her family from Dublin, Ireland, to the Lower East Side of New York. Everything in the new country fascinated her. Fireworks and L trains and stickball games and the songs of peddlers calling out their wares in a dozen languages. She loved to watch the policeman go by on his horse and the hook and ladder come round the corner like a long red dragon. But more than anything else, she loved to watch Mr. Coletti, the monkey man. Mr. Coletti came to 2nd Avenue once or twice a week with his monkey, Espresso, and his hand organ, a big box on a wooden leg which tweedled and tootled out a super confabulation of sounds whenever he turned the handle. He was an old man with white hair and a big white mustachio and eyes that crinkled up at the sides so that he always seemed to be laughing. And perhaps he always was, for the children of 2nd Avenue knew that Espresso was the funniest monkey in Manhattan. Espresso would clap his hands and dance round and round in the circle formed by the children. When Mr. Coletti gave a little tug on the long yellow cord tied to the monkey's belt, Espresso would do a perfect somersault, sometimes two. If you held a penny out between your fingers, he would suddenly pluck it away and tip his little red cap. Then Mr. Coletti would say, "Hey, Espresso, give the penny to the boss, huh? Put her in the bank." And Espresso would drop the penny into Mr. Coletti's pocket while the children cheered. And Espresso could ride a tiny tricycle and make the funniest faces, and what's the use? You had to see him to believe it. Often at home, Mr. Coletti would scold Espresso in Italian because Espresso didn't understand very much English. "Hey, Bambino, why you make so many faces? I didn't teach you to make dopey faces, Bambino." And his wife would smile as she drank her coffee, for Mr. Coletti called her Bambina, even though she was 73. Mr. Coletti called every old person Bambina or Bambino, little girl or little boy, and he called every child under 10 Signor or Signora, sir or madam. It seemed to make everyone happy. Of all the children who loved Espresso, Kathy Dunn loved him the most. Kathy was given a penny a day for candy, but she always saved those pennies for Espresso. She would rather see Espresso tip his hat to her than to have the 3 vanilla cookies or the 2 braids of licorice a penny could buy in those days. But Kathy was just a little frightened of Espresso, not because he was a monkey, but because on certain days Kathy was convinced that he wasn't a monkey. When he blinked his eyes so mischievously and did such human tricks, Kathy would be reminded of stories she heard back in Ireland about the little people, the elves and leprechauns. It seemed perfectly obvious to her. Espresso was a leprechaun. Oh, it was a delicious secret. Only she and Espresso knew it. Espresso would blink at her, and she would blink back in their private leprechaun language. One day, Kathy was standing in the circle of children watching Espresso. She held her penny tightly to her fingers as if it were about to fly like a bird from its nest. She was waiting for the right moment to hand it to Espresso. But the monkey just didn't seem to notice Kathy's penny. "Hey, look at that, signora," asked Mr. Coletti. But no, Espresso was too busy having an ugly face contest with Joey Basuto. Then Aaron Kendall, who lived next door, said to Kathy, "You gotta hold it by the rim, otherwise he won't take it." "Oh, he knows me," said Kathy. "He always takes it. Let's see you do it." "Nah, not me. I always save my pennies for the witch." The witch? Well, that was even better than a leprechaun. Kathy was about to ask which witch, but realized how silly that would sound and asked, "What witch?" "The witch," said Aaron. "The witch," said Kathy. "Which witch do you mean?" "Oh, come on, I'll show you," said Aaron. Kathy had never seen a witch, not even back in Ireland, where children often saw witches hiding in the early morning mists and in the evening shadows. And though she was afraid of witches, Kathy had always wanted to see one, from a distance, naturally. Well, they walked along 4th Street toward the school. Kathy walked that way every day, yet she'd never noticed a witch. Was Aaron trying to play a joke on her? He probably was. He liked to play jokes on all the girls, and particularly the ones who giggled a lot. There, Aaron was pointing up the block toward an old lady sitting on a wooden crate. "That's her. That's her." It was the pencil lady. "Is she a witch?" asked Kathy. "Of course she is," whispered Aaron. "And you better make sure you give her a penny every day, or else." Yes. Yes, it was so obvious if you really looked. The old woman was dressed all in black. Her face was wrinkled. Her hands were twisted like roots torn from the earth. In her lap was an open box of pencils and a tin tray holding a few pennies. Her head was down. She looked at nothing. "She can see everything," whispered Aaron. "She's a witch." Kathy shuddered. Her heart felt like a big bass drum being pounded in a parade. She was very frightened, but strangely happy. She couldn't believe her luck. She'd been walking past a real live witch on the way home from school every single day. Look at her. Oh, what an evil woman. It was wonderful. Now she had a witch as well as a leprechaun. "Give her your penny," whispered Aaron, "or she'll turn you into a stick or a spider. She's got all kinds of witch spells."
Was the old pencil lady a witch? And could she cast a spell on Kathy? Well, Kathy believed Aaron, and she gave the old lady a penny. As a matter of fact, every day after that, she gave the old lady a penny. And then one day she forgot. And when she realized what she'd done, she worried that the old lady might cast a spell on her for forgetting. And by coincidence, that night Kathy got very sick. Then she was sure a spell had been cast. Only Dr. Belasco could make things right for Kathy again. I think you'll enjoy the rest of this story, The Witch of 4th Street, as well as the 7 other stories in the book. Look for The Witch of 4th Street and Other Stories by Myron Lavoie. And while you're at the library, ask them if they have this book, The Whistling Tea Kettle by Mindy Skolsky.